friends, welcome to All by My Shelf. I'm Miss Rachel, and it's so nice to see you. Today's panel is Rainbow Rom-Coms, Queer Joy on Bookshelves. All 6 of our authors have written amazing queer rom-coms that come out this year. Our authors today are Anna Birch, Lev Rosen, Lyla Lee, Leah Johnson, Adiba Jaigirdar, and Ciara Smyth. If you're a Glenside patron, click the link marked Glenside in the description. That'll bring you to a form that will let you put the books on hold that you would like to read from these panelists. Since none of the books are out yet, it'll all be the physical copies once the library is able to reopen. I hope you enjoy this panel. Hi friends, welcome to the 2020 Rainbow Rom-Coms panel, which is all about queer joy on bookshelves. I am Miss Rachel, and I am going to let our lovely panelists introduce themselves and their books that are all coming out this year. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna because she is first alphabetically. So Anna, will you say a little something about your book?
Hey everyone, I'm Anna, author of I Kissed Alice, and here's the cover. And here's some news I haven't told anyone yet, so this is going to be just for Rachel. The publishing date it is now being published on July 28th. Yay! And I'm from Birmingham, Alabama.
What's it about? What's your book about?
Sorry, I'm really bad at this. Okay, so my book is about 2 girls. I'm really bad at talking about my book. I can talk about anybody else's, but I'm terrible at doing mine. Mine is about 2 girls who go to a performing arts school. They are bitter rivals in person, but they have found each other anonymously online in a fan fiction database, and they're now writing fan fiction, and they are best friends, and they might even be falling in love. Aww. Yay! Yay!
Okay, we're gonna go over to the Henna Wars. So Adiba.
Hi, so I'm Adiba Jaigirdar. I'm the author of the Henna Wars, and it's about 2 teen girls with rival henna businesses who fall in love, and it's out on May 12th from Page Street.
So cute.
We love it. Okay, Leah, you should see me in a crown.
Woo-woo. Hey y'all, I'm Leah Johnson. I'm the author of You Should See Me in a Crown and the forthcoming Rise to the Sun, which will be out summer 2021. You Should See Me in a Crown is about a girl named Lyla Lee who feels like an outsider in her very small, very white, very straight hometown, and she just wants to get out, but she doesn't get the financial aid for college she's anticipating, and so she has to run for prom queen in order to win a scholarship. And along the way, she might just be falling in love with her competition. Dun, dun, dun.
We love to see it. We really do. Lyla.
Hi, my name is Lyla. I'm the author of I'll Be the One. It's a glare. Okay, I'll Be the One. It's about a Korean American girl who basically gets into this internationally broadcasted K-pop competition, and she's trying to be one of the first plus-size K-pop stars in the world, and but the competition doesn't go smoothly, and she also meets like this unfairly attractive model that she falls in love with.
Yes, we love it. Lev.
Hi, I'm Lev Rosen. I go by LC sometimes when I'm writing. I wrote Camp, and I also wrote last year's Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, and they're both coming out, Jack of Hearts in paperback and Camp in hardcover on May 26th. They're currently scheduled for May 26th. Camp is about 16-year-old Randy, who for the past 4 years has been going to a queer summer camp, and there he has fallen in love with Hudson Aronson Lim, who to him is the dream man, but Hudson has never really paid much attention to nail polish wearing, makeup wearing theater kid Randy, because he is very much only interested in the masculine jock types. But this summer, Randy has a plan, and he comes back as Dell. He has completely remade himself, butched up, made himself totally masked, and he is going to win Hudson's heart. But of course, nothing ever works out the way it's supposed to.
Nope. We love it. And then last but not least, we've got Ciara.
Yes, so I'm Ciara Smyth, and this is, I wrote the Falling in Love montage, and it is about two girls who meet at a party, and Saoirse does not want to be in a relationship, and Ruby is only there for the summer, so they agree to have a kind of relationship where nobody can get hurt because they know when it's going to be over, and they're just going to do the fun parts like you would see in the Falling in Love montage of a romantic comedy.
We love it. It's so cute. Okay, and I was like, oh, this is one of the panels where I've actually read everybody's book, so we're really doing great, and they're all so good, so much fun. So do y'all remember what the first queer YA book you read was, or the first one that really had an impact on you, if maybe the first one you read wasn't one that you really connected with? And anyone can start.
Okay, so the first one I connected with was History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. I remember specifically sitting in my living room, holding it to my chest and just bawling. Like, the ending was so beautiful, and I felt so seen by the characters' kind of mental health stuff along with everything else. Wonderful.
Okay.
It's not a YA book, but I remember it was junior high and middle school, I read the Mercedes Lackey Magic's Promise series, which is deeply problematic for many reasons. There was a whole thread on Twitter recently about it, but it was the first time I had seen like just socially acceptable gay men in any sort of book. And I remember being like really sort of wowed by that. I wasn't even sort of aware of my own sexuality yet, but that definitely, as problematic as it is definitely a sort of keystone text for me now.
Yeah.
I have two. The first one isn't technically a gay book because like it only has a gay character. It was Will Grayson.
Okay.
And that I read as a high schooler, and that was basically the first time I read a book with like a protagonist that was gay. And then the second one was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which I read as an adult, and I remember it being so like life-changing for me because it was the first time that I saw not only like a queer story but like a queer POC story, and like just the discussions that they had about like family and like issues about being like a person of color in like America. I mean, as well as those two boys' relationship really like affected me and it made me realize that like there's like a window out there for like other voices of YA that I hadn't like really read before as a teen.
I think. Oh, sorry.
No,
I
it's
interrupted someone. Okay. Do you want to go first? Go on.
Well, to be honest, I'm just going to tag team Lila's answer anyway, because both of those were my exact answers. But since I'm going to pivot so we can switch it up, I wanted to read Pretty Little Liars when I was in like middle school, like whenever the books first started coming out. And I remember like walking towards the checkout at the library with this book. I was like, I'm a big kid now and read this big kid book. And my mom read the book jacket, and they, you know, they describe in there that Emily is a queer character. Not Emily. Yeah, Emily.
Mm-hmm. Emily, I think. Yeah, Emily.
I don't know. I was like, if you've read PLL, you know. But like, I remember being like, oh, like, how cool! Like, can't wait to read it. And my mom was like, no, you're not bringing this gay business into the house. And so I was like, okay, just sadly like put the book back on the shelf and did not pick up another queer book until I read Will Grayson my sophomore year in high school.
Yeah, for me, I think the first book I read that had, or the first queer book I read that had an impact was Ash by Melinda Lowe. I think in my school library there were like 2 queer books, and I read one of them, and it was like really, really depressing, so it didn't make me want to like pick up another one. But then I did pick up Ash. I think I was like about 16 or 17, and what I loved about it was like how Ash had like a romantic interest with like a man, but also with like a woman, and it just felt like so incidental, and I just loved that about it. But I think what actually had the biggest impact on me was Melinda Lowe herself, because when I realized that she was like a queer Asian woman, I was just like, I didn't know before that like Asians really ignorant, obviously, but I'd never seen it before, so I was just like really shook.
Yeah, I think I'm like old, so when I was growing up, I don't think I read anything like that. I think when I was an adult and I was reading YA books, I read the first thing I came across was Julianne Peters books, and they were kind of the first thing that I read. But like growing up, definitely not. The thing that I remember most was not in books at all. It was TV. It was like the Sweeps Weeks kisses, you know, like when 2 of the female characters would kiss for readings. That was like that was the main thing that I remember happening. And then, although looking back on it, I think the gayest icon from my childhood reading was Kirsty Thomas from the Babysitter's Club.
Yes, I love it. That was one of mine too. I'm a little bit older too, so I'm like, all of these books came out when I was in college.
I think like the thing about all the books coming out when we're older, like I didn't start reading queer YA really like getting into it. So like Aristotle and Dante or Miseducation of Cameron Post, or like all these things that have become like canonical like queer YA texts. I didn't discover these until I was grown. Like I was in grad school before I was even like, maybe this isn't friendship feelings that I'm having. Let's read some YA and get some language for it. And so like I think that's probably the case for a lot of us, that like even when we were reading it the first time, it still wasn't, we still hadn't really tapped into that in the way that we would in our adulthood. So,
and that's so funny because like what you just said, oh, these aren't just friends feelings. Like I went through the same thing being bi. Like it took me becoming an adult to recognize, oh, the reason I'm like so shy around these girls is because I have a massive crush on them. You know? Right. Like, do I want to be friends with them, or do I want to date them, or do I want to be them? Like that is the question.
Yeah, I don't even think growing up I knew anyone who was gay, so it just didn't seem like, it wasn't a thing that people did. Like people would kiss their friends in the club or something, you know, and that was a thing that happened. But that was as much as, I don't know, a representation that I can remember. Like that was what it was like, at least where I was. And I think that it's really hard then if you can't, sorry, that's my dog. If you can't see that stuff go around, because it just doesn't seem. You talk among yourselves, I'll be back.
Oh my goodness.
This is Winston like freaking out right now, guys. Kaylee's asleep on the couch and like just exactly one ear popped up.
Oh, so cute.
Went back to sleep.
Winston is not allowed in my room without supervision, and since I can possibly be watching him while I'm doing this, he is locked somewhere else. He's fine. He'll be fine.
Sorry.
So do y'all have any favorite like epic rom-com moments, either from like TV or movies or other books or your own books? Like those classic, like cinematic, even if they're not in cinema, you know, they can still be cinematic. Those moments when it's like it just happens on screen or on the page and you're like, yes, that is everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah, see, my entire
Yeah.
But I think one of the I don't have like there's lots of specific moments that I love. Like there's lots of like little bits and pieces and like scenes and stuff. But what I really love is like the grand gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that is like people criticize it for being creepy or, you know, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, in real life, sure, but this is not real life. So I'm going to just enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy every single one of those moments where somebody does something so ridiculously over the top just to be like, yeah, I love you. Let's do this.
I love that. And I'll tell you the thing that I love, especially in YA, is that moment when the main character and the love interest, it's like the love interest goes from being like just a boy or just a girl to being the boy and the girl. Like it's like they look at their friend and suddenly they see their friend in a whole new light as someone that they can like fall in love with. I love that.
I'm like thinking about what Adiba said earlier about like, I didn't even know Asian people could be queer. I'm thinking about all of my favorite rom-com moments, and every single one of them centers a cis straight white woman. So like the moment where Lloyd Dobler is in the front lawn with the boombox, or the moment that Richard Gere gets out of the limo and climbs up the fire escape from Pretty Woman to rescue Julia Roberts from her like tower or whatever. Like those are my like go-to moments. I'm like, yes, we love it. Can I have that? I don't know. I was like, maybe not. But for them, we love that for them.
I've always been really into anything like so over the top screwball, like Ciara was saying, with the like completely unbelievable. So I always think about like Bringing Up Baby, where it's like, yes, I am going to help you, you know, get this leopard down from a roof. That makes perfect sense. Anything like that, where it's like, clearly this is an unbelievable situation, but I'm going to help this person in the unbelievable situation, is always what really like gets me, because it's about sort of accepting that person's reality on some level is true, even if it doesn't seem true. So it's about really trusting someone, and that those moments are the moments that always really get me because of that.
I grew up, sorry, I keep doing this.
You go first.
Okay. I grew up on Bollywood movies. So basically all of the big moments for me were like these like literal Bollywood moments, which I obviously also mentioned like in the Henna Wars as well. Because Nishat is always talking about like Bollywood moments and having like a Bollywood moment, but she doesn't think that she can, because obviously Bollywood is very, very straight. But what I love about like the Bollywood movies that I grew up with is that they are like really over the top, like dramatic. And because until recently, like you couldn't have like kissing scenes and stuff, so they're filled with like all of this like longing, all of this like romantic tension that you usually don't get in like Western movies. And I love it. Like I love all of those moments, and I love like all of like the song and dance of Bollywood and stuff and how they portray romance. So yeah, that's what I grew up with.
Okay. Yeah, Adiba talking about Bollywood made me think of Korean dramas, because that's where my background is in. And I think my favorite like cinematic like rom-com trope, I mean for Korean dramas and also like Hollywood movies, is like the meet cute, because like the meet cute like never really happens in real life, but like in like shows or like movies, it's like, oh, like they met coincidentally in this one moment of time. So I feel like that's always so fun. But also for me, I feel like I always love the trope where the childhood friend, like you grew up with this person, but then the childhood friend moves away, and then they come back and it's like, oh, you're suddenly hot, you know. So that's my favorite. And like I guess for me, as like as everyone was talking about, that like in like K-dramas it's always a guy and girl, and like for me, I feel like it'd be awesome to see more like queer stories like that.
Yeah, that's kind of where, my inspiration from I Kissed Alice came from, was the whole trope of like mistaken identities or whatever. It's literally a retelling of You've Got Mail. It's all of these very straight, it's usually, it was Tom Hanks and what's her face, but I wanted to see it happen with two girls. Like, why couldn't it happen with two girls?
That's a really great segue into my next question, but I am going to shout out my two faves, which are the Ferris wheel from Love, Simon. Because that makes me cry, like, even thinking about it. And then also Ashley Poston's The Princess and the Fangirl has two grand gesture moments in the span of like 3 chapters. And one takes place like in the middle of a convention floor, and then the other one takes place on an escalator, and like it's just so good. So yes. Speaking of tropes, though, are there any romance tropes that you have not yet gotten to write about that you really want to cover on, like, for a story in the future, whether it's like a short story or a full-length novel, something like that?
Well, camp obviously is about like, disguising yourself, and those tend to be the tropes that I'm really attracted to. The inspiration for camp was those 1960s sex comedies, Rock Hudson, Doris Day, and inevitably, like, he's like, I'm going to disguise myself as someone else to win someone's hand and to like prove something, but I fell in love with her. Oh my goodness. And so any sort of trope where it's like someone has to, due to circumstance, is pretend to be someone they're not, and then inadvertently fall in love. So I love, any sort of the You've Got Mail situation where they don't know each other and it's a secret. I love Bells Are Ringing, where they never meet. I'm referencing all these 60s things. But Bells Are Ringing has a woman who essentially runs an answering service and pretends to be different people with different clients, and she falls in love with one of them and like starts meddling in their real lives. And I would love to do something like that. I'd love to do something very You've Got Mail-y. I love anything where no one's entirely aware of who they are when they first get into the relationship, because I feel like that's any relationship. It's just taken to a fun, comedic, ridiculous extreme.
I will say.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Somebody go ahead, Anna, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
Okay. Well, I'll say that one of my favorite tropes of all time is fake dating. And I don't know when Leah Johnson is going to get her shot at a fake dating novel, but just know, when I do, it's going to be magical. That is my favorite. Next to that, like that, and but there's only one bed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I can write a whole novel around there's only one bed, but once again, when it happens.
Well, funny you should say that, because I have been trying to think, so like I'm nearly finished with my book 2 edits and stuff, so I've been trying to think of like where I'm going to go for book 3, and I think I have there's only one bed, but it's a whole book. It's not a literal bed, but I don't want to say anything, but I think that's where I'm going to go next. Well, third, I guess.
Metaphorical bed, whatever. If there's only one, then
there's only one dream closet. So mine, so I love Friends to Lovers, but I really want to do one that's like lovers to friends to lovers. Like maybe they were like childhood sweethearts or something, and then they broke up and then they find each other again. Like I love all the history behind that. It's so romantic.
Okay, so I will say that I had a lot of fun with these tropes that I explored in I'll Be the One, because it's like a fun, like rivals to lovers kind of thing. But I did fulfill my dream of writing a friends to lovers trope in my book 2, which is coming out next year. And for that one, there's the whole like the two girls were friends. They went to middle school together, but then like they moved away, and then like the one of them comes back, and it's like the whole "you're hot" moment in that book.
I'm like Leah. I love the fake dating trope. I mean, I love all like romance tropes, but I love the fake dating trope. But I actually had written it for my second novel, which is coming out in 2021, and it also has that there's only one bed trope, but that trope doesn't really work with Bengalis, because Bengalis, like, you can literally have 10 Bengalis like in a single bed. That's just like what we do. So it kind of works, kind of doesn't work. I love tropey books, so a trope that I'd love to write is lovers to like rivals back to lovers, because it's very chaotic and messy, and I love chaos.
Amazing. Okay, so obviously we sort of touched on it a little bit in how sort of queer YA has made a lot of like leaps and bounds. Like, it really wasn't even a thing initially. Did I freeze? There we go. And obviously there's so much more rep now than there has probably been ever. But there's still a lot of places where we're lacking. So what are some things you'd like to see more of in future queer YA books? And this could also just be like things you haven't seen at all, or things you've only seen like once, or that you haven't come across even if you think they might exist. Stuff like that.
I mean, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I go. So I think for me, what I'd like to see, it's not that I want less of what we have now or anything like that, but I'd like to see more books that are not romance focused, that have, you know, queer characters. Like, I really love, like, my comfort sort of reading is like YA horror or mysteries and stuff, and I just like, you know, where the romance isn't really the focus, but the characters are still queer. Because I think most of the time, not always obviously, but most of the time in different genres, unless it's like specifically a queer romance novel, you don't get as many queer characters. So I'd like to see like just everything kind of be more gay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really important, I think, to see cisgender white folks decentered. I want to see more stories about queer people of color. I want to see more stories about people who, their gender is, not cisgender. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think.
Go on, Leah.
I think, Adiba, it's me and you every time. I think if we talk about, like queering the canon of rom-coms, I think that's crucial. I think it's important to show that like queer folks don't always have to endure trauma in order to have a happy ending. I think that's like the heart of my entire like job and as a writer. But I also want to, I don't know how to describe this. I wish that there was a way, and there is, and I'm writing it and it'll be there, but like we moved away from stories that are like tough stories to tell and pivoted almost directly into stories where it's all joy for queer people. And for me as a young person, I know that that would not have been the case. And that's like wish fulfillment. And I love that we have those stories now, but I wish that I also could have seen somebody who was like deeply religious and struggling with that, and like in a family that wasn't ready to talk about it, and then still ended up having an affirming ending at the end. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that we can show that things are very tough and like, but there is an ending in which like the queer kid ends up being exactly who they always were. Yeah, I think I would like us to take a chance to get back to that, in a different way than maybe we did when we were kids.
I agree with that. And I think that there's kind of people kind of want to put like queer books into like these two categories, which is that they are like really happy and they're really joyful, or they're like kind of tragic and sad. And that's just not reality, because you can have like joyful things happen in your life, and there can still be trauma, and it can still be like a rom-com, like you can fall in love but still have horrible things happen to you. So I definitely think we need a lot more books like that. I also hope that we can get more books with like intersectionality in it, because I think as we see it, there aren't that many intersections that we see. Like I never really felt represented in YA until like I wrote my own book. And obviously like I'm Muslim, I'm queer, I'm Bangladeshi and Irish as well. So that didn't exist before I wrote it. So I hope that we can see like just different intersectionalities, and I hope that we can see it as own voices, because sometimes I think, or what we're seeing now is kind of people who are maybe one marginalization writing intersectional books, and they're not all own voices. And I think we need to give the opportunity to people who are intersectional to write those marginalizations themselves.
I agree with that. I think all own voices stuff is what's really important to be pushing forward at this point. And I know I'm the cis white guy on the panel right now, so that sounds perhaps dumb, but queer stories have forever been co-opted by straight people, and then even within the queer community, we have white people co-opting stories of people of color. We have cis people co-opting trans stories. And I think, and this isn't, it's not even the job of us as authors. Our job is to be telling our stories, but it's the job of readers and publishers to be really focusing on centering own voices stuff, as opposed to working towards things that feel safer. I know as a gay man, a lot of gay male romance is written by straight women, and a large reason for that is because people feel safer having kids read queer male stories by straight people. It doesn't feel like a recruitment tool the way that it feels if it's actually coming from a queer person. And so I think we really need to focus on making sure that the stories that are being heralded, that are being pushed at actual queer teens, are ones that reflect them and are by people that have those experiences. Otherwise, it just becomes this objective, fetishizing sort of story. And if all you have to read about yourself growing up are these fetishized versions of yourself, you end up self-fetishizing, you know what I mean? And that you end up with a really skewed version of what you want to be. But the other thing I really want to see more of, besides that, is queer rage. I would love to see more queer anger stories. I feel like we don't get enough of that. We get a lot of like, I've been through stuff, I'm falling in love. I want to see like people actively burning down the conversion therapy centers. That's what I want. I want like full on all of that, which might not be what I'm supposed to say while promoting my sweet romantic comedy, but like, yes, burn down conversion centers and beat up homophobes with baseball bats. That's what I want.
I think like to tag on to that, like the commentary on own voices narratives, I really would love to see more queer POC falling in love with other queer POC. I think that often like books are easier to market and to sell just in general to the publisher when it's time for you to sell your novel. If, okay, one Black, that's okay. Two Blacks, it's too much. It's too much, you know? And I think that like a lot of us are sort of like trying to navigate that and figure out a way to tell stories that feel honest and true to us, while also figuring out how to create a sustainable career. And I don't think that authors and readers should ever have to compromise. Like, do I tell a story that like shows young queer POC that they can love somebody who looks like them? Or do I take a risk and not publish any more books because I decided that like that was what I wanted to champion in my first novel? I would love to see that.
And going off of that, I would also love to see like books that are like a cast of queer POC, because I think like when you're a queer POC, you gravitate towards other queer POC because, you know, they're your people. They're the people who you can connect to. So your friends and all of them, they are like queer POC as well. But often in books, what we get is like the one character and then all of their friends are like white. And for me, that's not particularly realistic. So I just hope that we can get like books that do have like entire casts of queer POC.
I feel like it's one of those things too where people will be like, oh, well, there's, you know, you got too many queer characters in this friend group. Like, that's not realistic. And I'm like, listen, I don't know if you've ever been around a queer person before, because you saying that leads me to believe you have not. But there's sort of like this gravitational pull where, like, even if you don't start out knowing that all of the members of your group are queer, like, sometimes it just happens along the way. Like, I know a group of teens where one was very loudly queer and then the other one was like, oh yeah, like I'm also like asexual, I think. And so like it just sort of happens, you know. And it's nice when you get that space with other people to like be yourself and to have that understanding. And so I'm all for full queer cast, for full queer POC cast. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's so strange in a way almost that like people like I don't know if it's because of where I grew up, because I grew up in a really small town, but like there definitely was a sense of being Alice, of being definitely like I mean even now as an adult, like in real life, like I don't know that many queer people, and like it's, you know, I thought when I came out that it would be like the L word, and like I would just somehow like a group of lesbians would appear and we'd hang out and we'd have lots of time before work to have breakfast at a cafe, and I somehow wouldn't be really tired at 6 o'clock in the morning. But that didn't happen, and I feel cheated. And so, but I think like going off the own voices thing, I think that's why like publishing houses have to diversify, because people are going to write what they're going to write. It's up to publishing houses to make it a priority to publish those own voices things, because we can't, you know, you can't stop Jenny in her house from writing like her awful book, do you know what I mean? But like you can stop it from being like, you can choose, like they choose what to publish, and I think so. And if you have like an entirely white panel of editors or straight editor or whatever, that's what you're going to get.
I think like just real quick, I know we have other questions to get to, but I feel like we all, like as an industry, every arm of this industry, from readers to booksellers to the publishing houses themselves to writers, we all have to unlearn this institutional, internalized like racism and homophobia and queerphobia and all these ideas that we have like adopted over time. I was reading, I don't know if you guys saw this today, but Kaysen Calendar was tweeting about like a trade review for Felix Ever After, and like the review was talking about like all these ideas, like, oh, this couldn't have happened, this is not realistic for this reason and X, Y, and Z. And like I think this is a problem of publishing, is that like even when a writer is writing directly to their own experience, no, that couldn't possibly happen. The heart of all of our issues is that like it doesn't sound marketable to you because you don't know that there's an entire community of people waiting for this, who have like waited their entire life for this book or for this specific narrative. And so yeah, I think it's not, the onus can't be on the writer to tell these stories, because I think we're all like bursting at the seams with this like eagerness. The onus has to be on like from the top down, you know.
I think part of the problem, sorry, But I think part of the problem is also like who we're writing to, because I think there's still this idea that we're writing for a white audience, right? So I think as writers, we also need to be aware of the fact that our audience isn't just like a white Western audience. We are writing for, you know, POC. We're writing for people who have all of these different marginalizations, and when we're writing, we need to take that into account. We need to write in a way that also, you know, caters to them, not just to the majority. And I think as writers, that is our responsibility. We can't just say, you know, I'm writing for this audience. You know, I can say I'm just writing for, you know, queer POC, but I also need to take into account everybody else at the same time. Can't just be for this one group of people. So I think we, like as writers, that is our responsibility.
You know,
I agree.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, there was just, you know, kind of on a lesser note, but in the same sort of, you know, conversation, there was a thread on Twitter the other day. I can't remember who tweeted it, that was talking about how, you know, the gatekeepers, the people that are buying the books, you know, we have to do this kind of performative, the way people expect teenagers to be versus who teenagers actually are. And, you know, that's another thing too, is we got to remember who we're writing to, and that's actual teens. And, you know, the publishers, they've got to remember that. Like, you know, people don't wear Ed Hardy anymore. I haven't, that was the example I used in the tweet, but, you know, they expect teenagers to still act like teenagers when we were teenagers, which they aren't. They're very analytical. They're very introspective. They have big opinions, and they just, you know, they act like that's not what's actually happening now when it is. It's like, have you even hung out with a teenager in the last like 15 years?
Yeah.
Gee.
But the emo teens do still all listen to Welcome to the Black Parade. So
Yes.
that, I think, will always be true
that.
at this point, from now on, now until forever.
I was going to say that I feel like a lot of what everyone is talking about gets to sort of this one root problem, which is that the one story problem, essentially. It feels like there's only one queer story, or that straight people see it as only one queer story. And what we really need to do, what we need the publishers to do, is really sort of inundate everyone with the diversity, like represent a queer community, like story. There's a bazillion queer stories. And I think that by seeing more of those stories, we get not only to show that diversity, and like every news story essentially opens up another news story in many ways, but I think that being able to show that diversity lets publishers then go in for more diversity. And also, you know, the fact that straight white people, essentially, as a white person, I was trained definitely growing up, like the white perspective is sort of the borderline. This is like anything else sort of varies from that. And the straight perspective is taught the same way. And so when we are reading anything that varies from that, it's almost like we're doing them a favor. And that mentality needs to go completely. And it's almost as though anyone who isn't a straight white man is not expected to have empathy, is not expected to be able to put themselves in the shoes of someone else just because they're different in some way. And everyone else, meanwhile, our whole lives, because so much of the literature we were taught growing up is by straight white men, about straight white men, all we have to do is put ourselves in other people's shoes. And that reversal is something that I think needs to happen, not just us all telling our stories, but like at an educational level as well. And we need to sort of make sure that kids are not just having the option of these stories, but are like actively being told to read them. So we need to get into these schools, and we need teachers to essentially be assigning these books as opposed to the literary canon. That's really sort of the issue that, it's a stem for a lot of the issues, I think. That makes sense? I have no idea if I made sense.
And that totally makes sense. Like, that's what I'm studying schools to be like an English teacher. And it's true. They like shove like James Joyce down your throat and Hemingway and, you know, all of these like straight white dudes that have something really important to tell us. And it's like, you know, if you want to teach anything outside of that, you catch flack from the, you know, the people that are kind of over your head, you know, that tell you what your curriculum is what you're gonna read, basically. And the thing is a lot of schools, at least here in Alabama, the decision on what's read is made like on like a district level, so that all the kids on the same grade in the same district are all reading the same book. So, you know, it's not just teachers having to do that, but, you know, there's got to be a whole shift in the way, you know, educators on higher levels are thinking about it too.
Yeah, I think it was, you know, a long time ago. But what you were saying about that, like one story, like there's one story, like I think even I felt like that when I was writing my book, and I kept people think what lesbians are like, or what if, like, I remember being like even really worried that people were like Irish people would read my book and be like, Irish people don't do that. I was like, but wait, I do that, so it's fine. So I think like I think you can get like you internalize that story as well yourself, I think.
Yeah. Going off of that, like that reminds me of how when I was writing I'll Be the One, so I'm bisexual, and I was in a relationship with a bi guy, and we're both Asian, and also like my friends were, I mean, at the time none of us knew we were queer, and I think we only discovered we were queer until we were adults. And that goes off with the fact that like when I was writing I'll Be the One, even though that was my own truth, when I was writing I'll Be the One, I was like, no one's gonna read this book about like two bi teens and then a cast of like queer teens. So like I was like I think I find that really sad that I like myself was thinking that, and I thought that this book wouldn't even sell. So I feel like the fact that I had that mentality like shows just how much we need like more representation of like a queer cast of POC characters, or like a queer cast of friends, because like yeah.
I remember when I was writing the Henna Wars, there were times when I would write a scene and I would text my friend and I would be like, so this is what I'm writing in my book, and I know it happened to me, but do you think it's realistic? And she'd be like, it happened to you, like obviously it is realistic. So I think like there's definitely this case of like the one story, and we get into our own heads and we start doubting like our own experiences, and we're like, what if my experience is different from literally like everybody else in the world? But I guess that's why we're writing the books, right? So that teens can read it and be like, actually somebody else has this experience too.
Yeah,
I think that what I try to remember as I'm writing, especially now that I'm like revising book 2, which like, yeah, it's monstrous. Like people are right. This is tough. But we're truly like the vanguard of like queer, like YA. Like this is the first time in history that Rachel, you probably can like cite this source if I'm wrong, but like, you know, I think this is the first time in history we've had this many queer YA novels coming out in one year, and like I imagine it should grow from here, you know what I'm saying? So like there's still so much space for growth and so much space for stories that we've never seen before. And I think one of the things that I truly hope that we see moving forward is not people who are like, you know, I just want to amplify this story. I want to amplify these voices. No, I don't need you to amplify anything, Karen. I want you to pass the mic to my sis over here who actually can tell the story from their own perspective. That's what I want. But it's just like, you know, we're so close to the beginning of like what this can be and what it's going to grow into. So, you know, it's an exciting time to be doing this.
Yeah, this is supposed to be PG. You just used a slur.
I was like, oh wow, you know what, my sincerest apologies to you all, not to I hate to know how to use that language.
We have 2 audience questions. One was, have you heard any good jokes lately? Which was from Maria, which I think we all need a good joke every so often, especially now.
Well, this whole planet is a joke right now, so I think that's pretty funny.
What is the difference between a cat and a comma? One has claws at the end of its paws. The other is a pause at the end of a clause.
That's so good.
Cute.
I have one that I actually, when this really stressed me out, this question, but I went and asked a friend of mine, Rachel Delahaye, who writes the Jim Reaper series, because she also wrote a joke book, and her contribution is, so two cannibals, best friends, are sharing a meal. One says to the other, gotta be honest with you, I just don't like your new girlfriend. The other one says, just eat the chips then.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
I have one from, sorry, go on, Anna.
I'm sorry. Okay, this one's just a little bit blue, just a little bit. It'll make people use their dictionary. What let me see how to go. Did you hear about the jurisprudence fetishist? He got off on a technicality.
I have one from my little sister. She's a teen, but she came up with this when she was much younger. What do you call a Muslim cat? A meow slim.
I stole mine from my sister, which is, what do we want? Low-flying airplane noises. When do we want them? Meow.
Yeah, I like that one.
Other joke. Okay, I'm gonna.
I won't be contributing a joke to this.
Okay.
I'm just gonna let you guys know I'm deeply unfunny.
I'm gonna go to the other.
All of my jokes are way too dirty.
Okay. Great.
We'll do those panel after dark.
Yes.
And you stop hitting the record button.
And then we've got our other one from Adriana Martinez, who is the best. She says, do you build your stories around a character, or does the story or world itself come first before you put your characters into it? What came first, the chicken or the egg?
I pick a concept first. So like, you know, two girls decide to do a relationship that is based on a falling love montage, and then I work backwards from there. So I go, well, who would do that, and why would they do that? And that's, yeah, that's, I basically start with something that I think sounds like a decent hook and work my way back.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm a big believer that every book sort of writes itself differently, and this is number 6. But I feel like generally what comes to mind first is sort of the idea of the book. So in this case, it was like, I want a modern queer version of a 60s Doris Day. And then from there, the character comes, and from there, the sort of setting comes. But sometimes it goes differently. One of my adult books, I was like, I wanted a noir that was the future after the sea levels had risen and New York was like half underwater. And that came first, and then I came up with the character. So I think it's really about sort of figuring out what the book's concept is, like Ciara said, and then following that to wherever it leads you.
Yeah, that's the same.
For me, for my book, well, I always wanted to write a K-pop book because when I was in middle school, K-pop was my world. And like, I feel so old because none of the bands that I liked in middle school are active anymore. But so I kind of fell off the K-pop train in high school and college. But like after college, I discovered BTS and other K-pop, and then so I actually fell back in love with dancing through K-pop, because what I will do is I look up videos of the BTS members or like other K-pop members like dancing, and I follow along. So that was actually what I did to get my mind off of publishing, because I was on submission with 2 books that didn't sell, and I was like, I need new hobbies. I took up dancing. So I had that inspiration from the book. But also, like, I feel like Sky, so my character name is Sky, and Sky is very confident, and she's like the total opposite of the kind of girl I was when I was a teen. And I think for me, like when I first started writing that book, her voice was just so strong in my head and her voice is what kind of led me throughout the entire book.
I think especially like in writing the second book, I've been doing a lot of thinking, like listening to all these like craft podcasts where every writer that I admire is like, yeah, my process is this for this book, and every book following is exactly the same, and I listen to the same playlist, and I start with the concept, and I do this. I don't know about y'all. Every time I sit down to write something new, it's like reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it starts with the concept. Sometimes it starts with one voice and side of a scene, and there's no story around it yet, but I just know that this person is doing this thing, and then next thing I know, like the entire book like reveals itself to me. Like every time it's something different, but you know, we're still figuring it out. Crown started with the idea, and then Liz was the only character who made sense to populate that type of world. But yeah, I'm winging it. I don't know. I'm hoping something comes to me eventually.
I'm the same as you, Leah, because for me, I feel like every book I write, I do something different, especially because I'm not a planner. I just come up with like a very basic concept, and then I just go from there and hope everything works out okay. So with the Henna Wars, I first came up with the idea of like the henna competition, and that kind of gave birth to Nishat and Flavia. And then I went from there. And actually, I didn't even come up with like Nishat coming out to her parents being such a huge plot in the book until the second draft. So I'd already written the entire book, and then I found the actual plot of the book, I guess.
I should have pointed this out earlier, but I wasn't, like, my brain wasn't there yet. If anyone who's watching this is super intrigued by like that discussion we had earlier about like own voices and like sort of like the co-opting of stories and cultures, the Henna Wars is especially great for that because it has a like on-page discussion between the two main characters about like henna and like a cultural thing that is sort of being co-opted for like a selling purpose, for like a competition. So like if you want that sort of like on-page discussion of like that sort of concept, that's gonna be a good one. Because it literally, like, that's literally the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay. You should read all of these books, but for that discussion in particular. Okay, so final question. Are you able to tell us anything about either what you're working on now, or what is, like, releasing next for you? And Lyla, make sure you talk about your itty-bitty books for any younger siblings.
Right. I guess I'll start. So, I also have another series that's called the Mini Kim series. I have it right here. So that's the Mini Kim series, and it's for the younger readers. And the next book of that series actually comes out in June 9th. And so I have that, and then I'll Be the One comes out in the week after, because basically like the third book of this book it was supposed to come out in May, but then it got pushed back because of what's happening. So now I have two books coming out back to back, so it's gonna be fun. Yeah, and then after that, for 2021, I have another queer Korean book coming out. I can't really say much about it yet, other than the fact that it's two girls and it's set in Korea, so it's gonna be fun. It is a rom-com too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So my second book is called Rise to the Sun. It takes place over 4 days at a music festival. It stars Olivia and Tony, two girls from very different backgrounds, but they end up needing each other to get through the weekend for a couple different sets of circumstances. And of course, because it's a Leah Johnson book, they fall in love along the way. That's it.
I already kind of mentioned a little bit about my second book. but it's another queer rom-com. It has 2 Bengali characters, and fake dating and one bad trope, obviously. And it's coming from Page Street in 2021.
Excellent.
My next thing is about a girl who sets up a social enterprise in her school where she will fix people's problems, but in return they owe her one. And the first person's problem that she fixes is her somewhat rival, and like, I don't think I'm going to be giving anything away by saying there is some sexual tension.
I just have a secret.
Ooh.
That's it. I don't
Yeah,
know
I'm
how
not allowed to talk about anything.
Okay, well, you have my email, so just saying. Okay, so thank you all so much for doing this panel. It was as much fun as I thought it would be, which is great. You all who are watching, if you wanted to get any of the books that we're talking about, whether it's our lovely panelist books or anything else, I will have links to everything in the description. If you are a Glenside Library patron, I'll have ways for you to be able to put everything on hold, so that when our copies come in and when we're allowed back in the library, you will be able to get them right away.